Good day. My name is George Hahalis, and I'm the Regional Sales Manager for Wolf Vision US in the Mid-Atlantic region. The topic we'll be discussing is what resellers need in order to create compelling AV as a service offerings. Joining us today is Frank Pellkoffer, Mike Gleason, Michael Fornander, and Tom LeBlanc. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. Let's get started by first just posing the question, what is AV as a service? Tom, would you like to start off?
Oh, good. I get the easy one.
Yep, you get the easy one.
So, I mean, a lot of integration companies that, we deal with, I'm at NSCA and, we deal with integration company owners and talk to them on a regular basis. And, for a lot of companies, a traditional sale is project-based and product-based. So, the money up front and here's your solution and let us know how we can help you down the line. Whereas AV as a service is obviously a different structure. It's more like a rental situation, like you're, getting your cable equipment from the cable provider. So you're not necessarily purchasing the equipment, you're procuring the equipment and paying for it on a monthly basis. And along those lines, you're getting assurance of good service, you're getting assurance of updated equipment and consistent quality. And for a lot of customers nowadays who don't want to shell out a lot of money for a project at the beginning of a project, it makes a lot of financial sense and also a lot of business sense. So that's my overview of AV as a service.
Okay. Anybody have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say from my standpoint, sorry, Mike, I saw you muted. I'll take it quick. For us as well, it's about that experience as well. It's like taking those services we all subscribe to now, and they're always working, they're always upgrading, and they're providing an experience for the user. And it's no longer just this, we've dropped in, installed a system, and we're gone. It's a relationship of how they stitch those solutions into their overall workflow and the consistency provided in that.
Yeah, and I always kind of answer the question by starting off saying what it's not. It's not just taking a capital project and starting to bill them monthly. It's not selling equipment and now I'm going to make a lease. It's not turning a maintenance contract and then sending out monthly invoices. The rest of the world out there, they look at AWS, they look at O365, they look at Salesforce, even to Tom's point, your cable box. Like that's as a service. And so someone else owns it, they manage, they upgrade it. And, at the end of the day, I think one of the biggest challenges in the AV market is really trying to align what you're looking to do to what the rest of the IT world's been doing forever. So if you try to take, a traditional service you have and just add a little spin to it and then tell them, well, that's AV as a service, they're going to laugh you right out the door. So you've got to align to the principles of the IT world to be successful.
And I
go ahead, Frank. I'm sorry.
I actually like Tom's analogy, the cable box. I'm not buying a cable box. I'm not buying a modem. I'm buying network connectivity and PBS. I'm buying an outcome, not a thing. And so in that way, there's really no relation to like a lease. I hear a lot of, people, oh, it's just like a lease. It's, I don't think you could be further from the truth. And so kudos to the analogy there, Tom, because it's very similar to that.
What are the advantages for the end user, for your customers, to look at AV as a service, say over the traditional way of doing it? I'll let anybody take that one. I apologize.
I'll jump in. When the guys on the call who are actually selling these can obviously expand on my perception of it. But to me, I mean, the assurance of quality. All right, so because I think the word outcome was just used, and for customers, what they're looking to achieve when they go out and get technology from an integration firm, they're not as into the technology as the salesperson who's trying to sell it to them is. What they're into is the business outcome. They're into the metrics that they might be able to achieve. It's not about, a particular feature of a UCC system. It's more about the impact it's going to have on meeting efficiency, on reduction of travel time, on improved customer retention, those are the business outcomes that customers are, or the types of business outcomes that customers are looking for. And when they enter an as a service scenario with an integrator, I feel like there's more of a nurtured approach to making sure that outcome is achieved. So now the integrator has entered a close relationship with that company, an ongoing relationship where if something isn't working, the integrator gets a chance to address it for the customer, and the customer has continuous opportunity to communicate any issues, positive or negative, to the integrator. And I feel like that outcome remains, sort of top of mind for both the customer who's entering the as a service contract and the integrator who's delivering it. And I feel like that's a big benefit for the customer in the end.
Okay. When you refer to that, I totally agree with you. Reciprocally, there's a new onus on the part of the managed services provider, which is continual selling. Because when you're in a subscription, your risk as an integrator is not realizing because the profit comes downstream, right? And so if your managed service is not, up to par, if you're not continually selling, continually conveying the value that you're delivering, when it comes time to really reap the rewards of a subscription, that customer may choose to vote and subscribe to someone else's service. So there's a real onus there to keep it going. It is a continual feedback loop, and I don't think that could be understated.
Yeah, and I think if you look at actually the times we're in right now, when as we're slowly getting back to the office, people are not going to just start spending tons of money on capital projects. They're looking to hold on to the cash longer. They're looking to say, okay, I need to get back to work. I need to have collaboration tools. But at the same time, I'm not going to go put a whole bunch of, equipment and going to do these types of things. So as much as we're in very trying times, I think, all the integrators right now, this is a huge opportunity for everybody to get into this service if you're not already into it, because this is the way that people are going to be consuming. This is the way they want to consume moving forward, especially until we get out of this recession, which isn't happening anytime soon.
Michael, you have anything to add?
Yeah, probably the only other thing I'd add is the idea that behind this subscription model and this non-ownership is that standardization too, right? Is consistently wrapping across all the organization rooms a similar interface, a similar solution. And as to someone's point, they really don't care what the black box is. They care how it stitches into their workflow and their required.
Frank, I'm going to come back around to something that you had said. The question was, what's the benefit to the customer? I used to be I used to be on the integration side many years ago when it was selling that box that you were speaking of, Michael, and just putting it in and then making it work. And you'd sell those warranties and you'd sell some extended service. But can you guys talk a little bit about really the relationship building that you have with the customer because of an AV as a service versus what I always think is a really quick way to get a disconnect from the customer by just installing a system and walking away?
Well, in any as a service model, churn is a KPI, and that's the nomenclature and the KPI. So exactly what I was saying in my prior comment. You cannot have customers churn away from your subscription, which means you have to deliver, and you have to deliver every single month the outcome. And if there's something going south, which happens, you have to have the infrastructure in place to make it rapid. If my cable box is going south, I don't know if it's the cable box or their connection. I don't know what it is. I just know I'm not watching my PBS show and I've got a problem. They're pretty darn good about having 24/7, support, being able to remotely reboot devices. I mean, I've lived it here in my own office. And there's a significant cost in creating a support system associated with that. There's a significant cost with carrying the financial burden of subscription-based equipment, because I'm selling an outcome, but I still need equipment to realize that. And Michael and I were talking about this last week, that, you know, I say if you're a $20 million AV integrator that wants to turn into a $20 million as managed services provider, you probably need $40 to $60 million of capital sitting there. And there's companies that, you know, assist with this, but you better have a plan. You better be using the right nomenclature. You better be able to convince them that you're worth financing, because the fastest way to go broke is move from a capital-based business to a subscription-based business. It's going to happen one brick at a time, and there's no fast way to make the transition. I would add to that, if you don't maniacally commit to the transition, you're going to live in that dreaded middle ground where some of your projects are not subscription based, and some of your projects are capital based, and that's where the whole momentum of both models slows down. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to say, my canteens are full, my backpack is ready, and here we go. And it's a commitment, and you got to cross the the valley of the shadow of death. But when you get to the other side, you know, there are companies like Mike's. I mean, they're experiencing rapid growth. They're hiring because they've got a huge, you know, book of business that's all subscription based. It's the vast majority of their revenues, and you know, that's what we look for in partners here at Utelligent.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunity we all have is just the stickiness with the client. You know, Tom did a good job talking about the business outcome. You have the ability now to create an incredible end user experience. What I mean by that is, when you're monitoring somebody's environment 24/7, 365, you've implemented the equipment, you know everything about it. You can actually have business conversations about them, because you're looking at all the different rooms you're monitoring and managing and saying, hey, let me tell you exactly where your adoption is at. Let me tell you what type of services you're consuming, what you're not consuming. You know, you're providing them more data analytics than they've ever had before. You're no longer the person that, okay, they installed, you know, this widget in the room, and when it breaks, I call the guy, and the guy comes out in his trucks and he fixes it. You're actually becoming a partner with that organization, to showing them how they're consuming the technology and how it's running their business. It raises you to a much higher level than just being a vendor for them.
Yeah, really, you know, it places the technology in the background too, right, Mike? I mean, it becomes, again, a tool within the workplace, and something that they just know they walk in and rely on, because you've already identified a problem the night before, fixed it before that meeting started, you know, the next morning. So it is that just simple. It's now no longer an issue that they tackle at the beginning of every meeting, but just an assurance that it's simply a tool they utilize in their business.
Yeah, I mean, stickiness is the word I often hear, where, you know, when an integration company, you know, has this sort of relationship with a customer, there's that stickiness, that element where they get to continually go back to them and nurture their relationship and be there when they explore new, you know, possibilities for their facility, or when they open up new meeting rooms, or when they open up new facilities. The integrator gets more return business because they have this stickiness in their relationship with customers. But, you know, one thing, I think, you know, Frank did a really good job of describing it earlier, but I think there's a risk to these conversations, because as an industry, I think we tend to romanticize, you know, the nature of an as a service or managed services or recurring revenue relationship with customers, because it is that great opportunity to have that recurring income, and it is that great opportunity to have that stickiness with customers. But there is so much risk and involves so much commitment for a company that has to make that transition from the project-based revenue model to more of a recurring monthly service-based revenue model. You know, NSCA talks to a lot of companies that kind of go through this. Some do it really well, and others don't. The ones who do it really well are the ones that really fully commit, spending over a year trying to rewrite sales contracts and restructure their service department and and retrain their sales team and work with the legal department to, to get in place all dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. And I think these are the real challenges that I think often get overlooked when, the issue's sort of romanticized in this industry. And I think we all can relate to, reading articles and going to conferences where everyone's like, snap your fingers and, explore these service revenue models. And it's just not that easy.
Yeah, I think Tom hits on a good point. When you've been doing as a service for a while, you know what an SLA is, and you know what your clients hold you to SLAs. And when you have monthly calls with them to go through all the tickets and things of that nature, and you're talking about SLAs, if you don't have, the knock in place, and you don't have the software that can actually see what's going on, and you can't match those SLAs, you're going to go broke really quick, because people will stick you to those SLAs, and they're going to expect you to be able to handle it. And they will also say, okay, show me all the data of what happened and show me how you responded to it. And it's no longer that relationship where they just call you up and you send out a guy when they're available. You have to have the infrastructure in place, or you're gonna go down quickly.
And here's a risk, I think, to the AV industry. And I used to have an integration company here in Silicon Valley. We were small, 10 million, gourmet, but I'm familiar with the whole model. And I would suggest that, like the telcos, when we went from digital PBXs to voice over IP, it was the IT VARs that picked up the vast majority of that business. And that is happening now. And what we're seeing at Utelogy is kind of the tip of the spear for the Fortune 10,000s globally, being the Tata, the ATT, the Vodafone, British Telecom, the big telcos, who then are white labeling services to the large AV integrators. But who's taking the money off the table? The subscription-based things. And then those mid-market companies like Mike's, they're the ones that are picking off, 2,000 room contracts, in the mid-market. And then the smaller integrators, there's a huge opportunity. But if you don't make the transition, then I think margins are going to shrink even further for you. The pool of competitors is going to be even larger. And all you're going to be is an installer of someone else's cable box, if we continue the analogy, right? And it's a downward spiral that is not going to change, in my opinion. So, it's got to be tough to be an AV integrator, because you've got to make the change, or you're relegated to even smaller margins, and that's not a good place to be.
I'm curious. You've actually touched on a lot of topics that I was going to ask about, so I appreciate that. But I want to expand on it a little bit. Tom, you had mentioned about the infrastructure and what you need, and the legal issues that you need to go through in the time frame. And Frank, I think you're right. It's dangerous for an AV company that's not trying to pursue this. And obviously, over the last 10 years, you've seen more and more AV companies merge with IT companies. It's becoming very, it's happening everywhere. Say you are that smaller company. Say you are that $10 to $20 million a year company that doesn't have that in place. What do you need to do to make that happen? And can you do it on your own? Can an AV company that does 10 million a year do it on their own? And how would they go about doing it? How do they offer that service to their customers? Or AV as a service?
Of course they can. And there's 100 ways to achieve that, or at least several. Were it me, knowing what I know now, I would actually start a separate company, and I would hire people that understand the sales process. I would hire an operations, a GM, or some sort of executive level person that's been there and done that, and as a service. And I wouldn't try to change the culture of my AV and the AV, museums and things like that, live events. That's not going away. That, I think, is still going to be traditional AV. But those law firms with a few dozen rooms, for the smaller integrator, hospitals, there's plenty of conference rooms and small businesses, and that is a ripe opportunity. But were it me, I would start a wholly separate business, and then I would procure all of my AV from my integrated side, and the two would compete with each other, but it would be a maniacal focus. And you use the word try, George. Anybody that does the word try, don't invest in that company, because like Yoda said, do or do not. There is no try. You must commit, or it's a slow bleed out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's going to take you a while to build it. And I think, use your network, build partnerships with companies. Believe me, at Netrix, we've been doing AV as a service for over 6 years now. You know what? We had to look at everything from how's our sales reps going to be comped, to how we're going to meet this SLA, to how do we build this as a national and a global, plan. So, you're not going to be able to do it overnight. There's the financial aspect, there's the knock aspect, there's the expertise. You're going to have to also know the networking side of the house. So I would say, talk to people that have done it, partner where you can. A lot of companies out there, you can partner to handle a good portion of it. Focus on what you do well. Don't jump in without doing a lot of background and talking to people that have done it before, because you'll learn really quickly this isn't an easy thing. But it is a massive opportunity. There's a ton of opportunity, and clients are wanting this in our industry. Faster we can get there, the better it's going to be, because they are wanting it. We just have to deliver it to match the same thing as the IT world is used to. And you'll be, as Tom said, stickier with that client than you've ever seen before.
Yeah, and Frank also mentioned tolerance to revenue, right? I mean, a company of a certain size now, with this type of transition, can't expect to maybe come out the same, the following year at a same revenue or a growth revenue, because it is an altogether different model as well. So there's that idea of going to a monthly reoccurring versus an overall capital expenditure kind of revenue model that a lot of AV companies and owners are used to.
I'm curious. Oh God, I'm sorry.
So I was just going to say, in terms of, smaller companies and how they can make that transition, is it possible for them? You can probably predict what I'd say, working for NSCA, National Systems Contractors Association. One of the big priorities that NSCA has had over the last several years is to turn those smaller integration companies away from that project-based revenue model toward more of a service-based revenue model. So there are a lot of, resources in place to help smaller companies with that. For instance, we have this sort of a council of business resources that NSCA members can lean on, and one of them involves, financial services and, helping companies to figure out how to set up, an as a service or managed services or service-based revenue model and create the processes that they need. We have training programs to help, sort of retrain salespeople to move them away from, selling project-based or trying to add service at the end of a project-based sale, and instead, asking the right questions up front and bringing up the right topics up front to make the customer be able to understand and feel comfortable in a conversation about an as-a-service model. We have sales training. We actually, NSCA members have an opportunity to do a free sales training and certification program that's solely based on how to sell as a service, which is something that smaller companies can take advantage of. So I think there are a lot of resources. Nobody's saying it's easy, but there are a lot of resources. Also, the NSCA network is pretty cool, because you can, there's a community in which you kind of lean on companies who have been through this successfully or unsuccessfully to learn how to make, not make the same mistakes that other companies have made.
Tom, I totally agree. And while it's a very expensive proposition for a software publisher, so we're a platform at Utelogy that's the foundation for an as a service model. And there's others out there, if you're an integrator trying to make the transition, you'll have to find something you're going to build your services offering upon. But we're here to also help people make the transition. When we founded this company in 2009, it was for the sole purpose of trying to save the AV industry, because I lived through the telecom crash in 2001 here in Silicon Valley, and that was in large part, although not exclusively, premised on the whole voice over IP and the IT VARs coming in and taking that business. And Mike talks about AV as a service in his company for the last 6 years. What he didn't tell you is that for years and years and years and years, they've been, desktop as a service, access points as a service, voice over IP as a service, UC as a service. I mean, they're an IT VAR, and they said, we're coming in. This AV space is wide open, and it's the last of the low voltage industries to make the transition. For whatever reason, here we are. So Utelogy is here to help and coach and guide as well.
Very good. Guys, I want to talk to you guys actually a little bit longer because I have other questions as well. But unfortunately, I've got the cue that we need to wrap it up. So I really want to thank all of you. I really appreciate Tom, Frank, Mike, Michael. Thank you for your time. And we really appreciate you joining us today.
Great to be here.
Thanks, George.